Okay, now we're going to look at labor variances. So the total labor variance, define my total labor variance, so how much I spent on labor compared to what I thought I was going to for direct labor specifically. I take the actual hourly wage rate times the actual direct labor hours used minus the standard hourly wage rate times the standard hours allowed for the, and when it says allowed, that means we're talking about for the quantity that was actually manufactured. So the short version of that is my actual rate times my actual hours minus standard rate times standard hours. So we need to find my variables first in this problem. So here's the information for the actuals. We got the actual production of 48,500 bags of corn chips, the actual hours of inspection, 360. Actual cost per hour of inspection is $8.35. Here's my standards. So for my labor, I've got, and we could look at machine hours too, but in this case, we've only got information about inspection. So I should have spent $8 per hour and only spent 0.01 hours on my inspection for these corn chips. So I need to find my actual rate. I need to find my actual hours. I need to find my standard rate. I need to find my standard hours. So my actual rate is this $8.35 per hour. My actual hours is 360. My standard rate is $8 per hour, and my standard hours here, I'm actually gonna have to figure out, okay, how many hours should I have spent based on my standards? I can't just take 0.01 here because that won't give me the right amount, because my actual hours I did in total hours based on volume. So my standard hours, I've got to take the 0.01 hours of inspection times the bags of corn chips that were produced. So 485 would be my standard hours. So then I've got all those, I can plug this into the formula. Total labor variance, I'm gonna take my actual rate minus my standard rate. Actually, sorry, let's get back here. Actual rate minus my standard rate, oops, times my standard rate, times my standard rate, minus my standard rate times my standard hours. Let's see here, actual rate times actual hours. Oops, I made a mistake here. This should be 823. Actual rate times actual hours, standard rate times standard hours, and subtract the two. So $874 is what I got for a variance. And this is a favorable variance because I spent less. When it comes out negative, that means I spent less than what I should have based on my standards. Now we can break this down further and look at, okay, did this variance come from the rate, more from the rate that I charged, meaning the hourly rate, or efficiency, meaning how many hours that I used compared to what I had planned to use based on my standards. So my labor rate variance is my actual rate times my actual hours minus my standard rate times my actual hours, or factored, it's actual rate minus standard rate times actual hours. So actual rate minus standard rate times my actual hours. Actual rate minus standard rate times the actual hours. Okay, so my labor rate variance is $126. My labor efficiency variance, so that this is unfavorable, by the way, it's a positive number. I spent more than what I would have anticipated based on the volume that I made. Units that manufactured. My efficiency variance. Now I'm looking at whether I use more or less hours than I would have anticipated based on the amount of, in this case, corn chips that I made. So I'm taking, for the labor efficiency variance, I'm going to take my hours and compare the difference there, my actual hours minus my standard hours, and multiply by my standard rate. So I've got my actual hours minus standard hours times my standard rate, which gives me 1,000, and that is a favorable variance. Favorable variance. So I spent less money than what I anticipated. So I did the total variance up here, but you could also find the labor rate variance and labor efficiency variance. And if you sum those up, add them together, then it should give you the total variance. So I just kind of showed you two different ways to get the total variance. And again, it is still favorable as it was before, favorable variance. So that's the direct labor total variance, the labor rate variance, and the labor efficiency variance.